Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. My name is Swire Ho, your host for the show. My guest today is Park Howell. He is known as the world's most industrious storyteller. This is the first for the Small Business Show. Park is the first guest that's come on to the show on his birthday. For that, happy birthday, Park.
Thank you, Swire. I appreciate that. Are you going to sing to me?
Uh,
That's okay. You don't have to. I won't put you on the spot there.
yeah, I'm really fascinated. Once we had the initial call, I went onto your website. You actually put your own life story there, from you as a kid, down to where you are, in your career. So, for those of us who might not yet be familiar with your work, what should we know about you?
Well, I guess the abridged version of the Cliff Notes is I've been in the advertising, branding, marketing world for 35 plus years. You can tell by my hair. I ran my own ad agency in Phoenix, Arizona for 20 of those years. And we really specialized in traditional advertising, branding, story development, that sort of thing. And then along came the internet and upset our apple cart on how we advertise, market, so forth. And we were having a hard time. We were struggling, to be honest with you, in the mid 2000, aughts. And I went looking for an answer of how do you stand out in this extraordinarily noisy world. We were lucky. Our son Parker was going to film school at the time over at Chapman University, a very renowned film school there. And I said, Parker, send me your books and your recorded lectures when you're done with them because, well, I'm paying for them. But I want to know, what does Hollywood know about helping you become a competitive storyteller in the most competitive, noisiest storytelling market in the world, Hollywood and LA? And that's where I learned first the Joseph Campbell, Blake Snyder's 15 steps to telling a story, right down the Pixar way, 6, 7, 8 steps, whatever theirs are. And I started using that. And it was very, very effective, but it was complex. And so I really dove headlong into learning the story structure for very long form storytelling, right now down to this very simple form that any business person can use. And it just uses 3 words: and, but, therefore, the ABT. And I know we'll be talking about that in a little bit. And so I brought it all back to my agency, started working with it, loved it. But what I loved even more, Swire, is clients were asking me to come and teach their people how to use these frameworks. And I realized late in my career that I loved coaching and teaching. In fact, I coached, taught at Arizona State University as an adjunct professor of practice in storytelling for 5 years. And I decided to wind down my ad agency, and I started Business of Story back in 2016. And now that's all I do is consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story to help you stand out in very noisy, crowded worlds. Like I say, when you use story frameworks correctly, you will hack through the noise and hook into the hearts of your prospects. And, face it, that's where all of our buying decisions are being made, is in our emotional centers of our being.
Thank you for sharing, Park. I couldn't get past the fact I stick on that for a little bit. And you actually, I think I'm going to do that. My son is going to college next year. So I'm going to ask him to do the same. Save all your work and save all your lectures. I'm going to relearn whatever major that he's going to be in. That's actually very smart. And, you actually picked up and pivot, I would say, your business, learning new technique, storytelling. However, we're streaming on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I could tell you that for the past 2 to 3 years, I would say, seems like storytelling, especially business storytelling, had become a buzzword, right? A hashtag, right? Everyone is doing, hashtag business storytelling. Do you think it's getting crowded? Are there really that much story to tell about a business? Don't we just want to go and buy whatever that they sell, and that will be it?
Well, let me ask you this, Swire. What is one of your favorite brands, a go-to brand that you buy from all the time, even if they're more expensive than the competition? Can you name one off the top of your head?
I would probably say it's in terms of fitness. I like fitness. There's a brand of proteins that I buy, I just buy it. I don't even look at other ads.
And is that because of the story that you bought into? And I mean that with all respect. I mean, people think if you buy into something, you're being had when you're really not. I mean, you're telling stories to get people to buy into your purpose as a brand, as a company, your vision, your mission. Because what we've learned in all the storytelling is your stories are not about you, and that's you, the listener, viewer here, or your company. And the stories are not about what you make. Your
Hmm.
stories are always about your audience, be they a prospect, a buyer, or a customer. And the stories are not about what you make, but what you make happen in their lives. So when you are thinking about communicating anything in your business, if you are stuck with features and functions and bullet lists of all the different great stuff you do, then you are caught in the trap of selling what you make.
Hmm.
But that storytelling monkey that's sitting across from you, we all Homo sapiens are storytelling apes, essentially. We actually don't care what you make. We only care what you make happen in our lives. So I imagine you're going back to that protein powder shake, nutritional drink, because it makes you feel better. But in order to do that, you had to buy into an ethos of theirs first. You probably weren't buying the ingredients. You were buying what the brand stands for and then how they deliver on that story in your health and well-being.
Yeah, I like that. Especially when marketers, they're smart, they actually create communities too. So not only that they will teach me what story to buy into, right? And also they actually coach me a little bit to tell others the story and the message that what they want to pass along. So they kind of train me, and I like to do this in my business. How do you train your customer to be mini ambassador for your brand? So they don't pay me, but I could speak for them to all my friends and people who I come in contact with at the gym. So I think, storytelling, do it the right way, can be, really, contagious. I,
Well, it's why you think about that. Noble Harari wrote this amazing book called Sapiens. He's written a few books, but starting with Sapiens, and he looks at how the Homo sapien became the most aggressive, invasive species ever.
Mm,
And we are the only being that we know of that thinks, organizes, plans, and acts using story. So you were just talking about building a community, us being social creatures. Absolutely, you have to build a community around that brand. What better way to do it than how we have evolved through time? And that's using the learning tool that is a story. And then once you invite them into your story and your brand, and like you said with this company, it's delivers on those promises it makes in your story, then you become an active participant in their story and are willing to share it, far and wide with your peeps out there, which leads to the most valuable form of advertising there is, and that is free word of mouth marketing, let
mhm.
alone becoming a repeat customer. So
Yeah.
now they've got a customer for life, providing they keep delivering on the story and the promises of the stories they've told you.
Yeah, let's get to it. I really do wanted to get your take on it. So for a listener who might not yet be familiar with ABT, what is it and how does it work?
Okay, great question. So real quick, I started, of course, in the complex world of the 17-step hero's journey, like I mentioned, and I found it, and I boiled it down to business, creating the 10-step story cycle system that has grown brands by as much as 600%, but it's complicated. So through my studies, I found the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, and ultimately landed on the and, but, therefore narrative framework. And I have found that the ABT is literally the DNA of story.
Hmm.
It is the building blocks for everything, because once you get these 3 words down, and, but, therefore, and how to use them, you start building this narrative intuition. So you no longer are anding your audiences to death, which is boring. You get one and, what is it that you want, and why is that important to you? But here's the conflict. You don't have it because of this. Therefore, imagine what tomorrow's going to look like when you get it, when you do this with me. Setup, problem, resolution. The ABT works on the 3 forces of story. That's agreement. We want a shared vision of a brighter tomorrow. Contradiction, but we don't have it because of this, which then lights up the limbic brain to say, okay, how are we going to close this story loop? What's the solution? Therefore, the statement of consequence or your call to action. Here's what we need to do next collectively to make that happen.
Yeah, I really like that. Actually, you gave me homework, and this is
Yes, I
also a
did.
first for the show. I actually I done my homework.
And what you did is you took the online course. I've got an online course out there called the ABTs of Agile Communications. It's a 1 hour course, three 20-minute video modules with me when I walk you through the primary ABT and then the secondary ABT that you can build on. And so that's the course you took. And did you come up with an ABT?
I did. It's not 100% complete, but I think it challenged me, like you had, said already, it's not about your bells and whistles, not about your features. It's, you create a story and let the buyer think themselves, yeah, I don't really have that. And oh, it seems like they have what we need. So maybe we should talk to them. So I think that's the mind opening, challenge. And, every time that I try to tell them something, can I really use the ABT to get them more interest in what I have to say?
Well, let's hear it. Let's see how you did. I have no idea, folks, by the way. We have not rehearsed this. Swire mentioned he took the course right before we went on live here, and he wrote an ABT. So this is the first time hearing of it, too. Go for it.
Yeah, just for everyone to know, I'm in the promotional product business. So this is my ABT. Building brand awareness connects people with a company, and it creates trust and loyalty to the business. But it is a challenging task to create engagement with the right audience. There's just too much noise and distraction to deliver the right message. Therefore, helping people understand your brand growth sales and retain employees is our goal at Garuda Promo. We have the capability to bring imagination to reality.
All right, Swire, that's an awesome start. Now, may I coach you? So your ABT begins like most ABTs begin when you're first crafting these for the very first time. And that is it's general, right? So say your first line for me again. We call this the statement of agreement. And folks, when he reads it to you, I want you to hear him to set the stage, hear how he sets the stage and why that's important. Go ahead and do that again for us.
Building brand awareness connects people with a company, and it creates trust and loyalty to the business.
All right. So when you say that, you're coming off generally giving an opinion or an assertion,
Mm.
right? You're just saying this in general and everyone should be nodding along. What I want you to do is write that ABT specifically to your audience. And we call this making a pronoun shift up top. Instead of being this third person general statement, I want you to think about your absolute audience. And I want you to actually think about the word you, placing that in there as if you were sitting across from an individual and say, you want this for your brand, and it's important because of this. But you are frustrated because you don't have it due to this, therefore. So, how would you rephrase that and statement of agreement by making it personal, making it singular to an individual?
If that was me writing it normally, I would probably say, you want to be a rock star and build awareness for your company. And then,
And
so
why is that important?
because they make themselves look good, because if they could create brand awareness for the company, they will become a rock star or they will advance in their career.
Okay, let's work with that then. So you want to be a rock star in your company and you know that brand development is important for that customer engagement and building lifelong customers.
Mhm.
Something like that. But are they frustrated right now? What's happening in their world that they're not to that rock star status quite yet? What's the problem you're going to help them overcome?
There's so much noise and distraction to get the right message across. So people are not paying attention to what they have to offer or to say.
Okay, so you want to be a rock star and build this amazing customer engagement, but there's so much noise out there, it's not happening.
Mhm.
Therefore, I'm just really boiling this down. Therefore, what's your solution for them?
Helping them understand the brand and to well, that's my challenge, right? My challenge is like I don't want to spill out all the bells and whistles. So I wanted to create words to say, because what I tell my client is, to help them grow sales and retain employees which when you think of it, in some ways, that's really what we do, to grow sales, to increase revenue or whatever that they would like to do. And the other end is to retain employees because of, all the uh, packages that we can do. So I think those are the 2 points that I'm staying within.
Okay. And that's good, and it's very generic. It does not speak to specifically what you offer. So
Mm.
you are in the promotions business, right?
Hmm.
The business promotions business. So everything you said in your first ABT, any number of companies can say and just attach their particular offering to it.
That's
Let's
true.
identify the fact that you're talking about the promotional world, right? Promotional
Hmm.
products that you can buy and use for your company to help extend your company's story beyond just the purchase. Now they're getting something else in return, right?
Yeah, I would say people work with us because the relationship that we had. So I think it goes back to my beginning statement. The connection, the message that they know that they're actually talking to a friend or trusted advisor instead of some person just answering the phone
Yeah.
that you found on the internet.
But that's about you. I
Hmm.
want I want it to be about them. And I want right up top, I want you to introduce the fact that you're talking about promotional products, are you not? So that they understand the setting of what you're talking about.
Okay.
So you want to be a rock star in your company. And if you build brand engagement through incredible promotional products, then you can build that lifetime customer you seek.
Mm.
But it's not currently happening because there's so much noise out there and you haven't found the right product that really expresses your unique brand story. Therefore, to engage way beyond the actual purchase, consider the hundreds of thousands of product options available to you through your company. So you
Mm.
see what I'm doing there, and that's not perfect by a long shot. But what I'm doing is clarifying this very general ABT that you wrote that was really good in that it used the form, setup, problem resolution, statement of agreement, statement of contradiction, statement of consequence, but it was so general, anybody could say that. I could have used your exact ABT in my world and just replaced promotional items with business storytelling.
Right.
Become a more profound and powerful storyteller so that you can hack through the noise and hook the hearts of your audiences, right?
Mm.
That sort of thing. So that's what I want you to do when you're writing these ABTs. And here's a kind of a 5-step approach to it. So first, you're going to start, of course, with what is it? You're going to come from the area of what you're already offering. So I want you to, number one, name your audience. What's important, or what do they want, and why is it important to them? This is all relative to your offering. Name your audience. What do they want, and why is it important to them relative to your offering? But what's the frustration they're going through, the hell they're going through right now because they don't have it due to whatever circumstances? So answer that problem. What's that problem statement that you're really trying to dial in this ABT? Then the therefore kind of writes itself, because the therefore is, imagine how much better tomorrow's going to be when you do this with us. So how are you uniquely equipped to help them get what they want? But you have to start out by setting the stage so that they know what world they're in your story. In this case, it's the business promotional item world. Let's get that somehow established right up top. But they don't currently have it because they've got the wrong vendor or they've got the wrong promo items going out. Therefore, imagine the customer engagement you're going to get when you do this with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for working with me. I'll definitely.
Does that make sense, though? You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? We
Yeah.
got to shake ourselves out of our own world and
Mhm.
tell that ABT from the point of view of your audience. What's in it for them? Again, you'll be really selling the outcome throughout the whole thing. And at the very end, you're going to share the offering. Here's the offering of how you get to that outcome.
I want to ask you a question. I think listener probably will have similar situation, and especially to my clients, sometime they don't want to be narrow to just one audience. I want everybody. So how would you coach them better? And then really, I have different personas, right? Sometimes it's a corporate buyer, sometimes it's people go to trade show. Should I have different story for the company, or do you just find one and you stick with it?
All right, let's tackle the first question. It's really funny. It's something that all of us Homo sapiens go through. It's a survival mechanism, and it doesn't actually serve us. This survival mechanism is thinking we've got to be all things to everybody because I don't want to leave any money out there. I want to leave nothing on the table. So I'm just going to say, look at everybody can use my service. Well, you know that old adage, right, Swire? When you try to try to appeal to everyone, you actually appeal to no one.
Mhm.
So I want everyone watching this to focus down who is your number one audience. Get super, super focused on them. It's the old Pareto principle, right? That 80% of your business comes from like 20% of your customers. And of that 20% of customers, they all usually have one thing in common. And you'll see that in the advertising world. I know got a friend up here in Flagstaff, Arizona that runs an ad agency called Mountain Mojo, and they focus on helping independent mom and pop hardware stores across the country to not only advertise, but then also help them with their internal sales and marketing systems. So yes, this at Mountain Mojo, they've got the capabilities. They can pretty much do any work for anybody, anywhere, but they got one singular focus, that one customer in the hardware store business. So that's the first thing. You want to get really super focused on that singular individual, and then that singular narrative about what is it that is going to motivate them, what problem solution dynamic are you going to solve for them. Number two, now everybody has more than one audience, I get
Mhm.
that. What I would do then, and I've got several audiences, so first and foremost, my number one audience these days coming out of the pandemic is learning and development folks. People like Home Depot, Walmart Canada, the US Air Force, University of Dayton, these learning and development professionals that are working with their leaderships hire me to come in and show them how to use the storytelling, starting with the and but therefore, for both internal communications to motivate their people and external communications. So that's my number one audience. My number two audience, close second though, is very related, sales and marketing teams. So they hire me to come in and work with their leaders in the sales and marketing realm. The third audience are HR professionals that want me to come in and work with their leaders that are trying to communicate and motivate their people to action. What do they all have in common? They are leaders that are trying to become more compelling communicators. So what I do is I will have an ABT set up for each individual group. Learning and development has one. Sales and marketing has a different ABT because they have different needs and they have different wants and problems they're solving for. HR is a different one. Yet they all fall under this one overall narrative banner, narrative guideline of business of story. And it's simply, we help you excel through the stories you tell. So what I like to do is create an overall arching ABT for the brand. In my case, Home Depot, a guy once asked me, he goes, Park, what's the shortest ABT you've ever heard? And so here's what my ABT for the business of story brand is. You communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story.
Mm.
So very simple, very simple. You communicate and care. Yes, I do, Park. That's my statement of agreement. But I hate to tell you, you're probably boring because you're leading with stats, facts, charts, graphs, when what our brain really wants is the emotional pull of a story. Therefore, learn the and, but, therefore, and the other three or the other two narrative frameworks that we teach so that you can excel through the stories you tell. And ultimately, that's the tagline. That's my call to action for everybody is with the business of story, learn how to excel through the stories you tell. But each audience gets a different ABT and a different focus, even though I'm training them using essentially the same frameworks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And, I think the best use scenario is you're telling a story that you're not even trying to sell, and people buy into that story so much, they act on it right away. I can tell you more than a few instances that I just talk to people randomly or a friend that they might talk about stories of a product that they're using, maybe something they just purchased from Costco, for example. And once they finish that story, I go ahead and go home and order the same product. And they're not even trying to sell, but then they are actually telling the story to have me sold on the product that they have.
Absolutely. I mean, that old saying is stop selling and start helping. And really that's what you're doing. And even when you go out and make a recommendation for a product, you're not necessarily trying to sell them that product. You're trying to help them. You say, "Hey man, this has really helped me. If you've got this problem, check this one out."
Mhm.
You're not talking about features and benefits and pricing and ingredients. You're talking about the story of how it's impacted you and created the outcomes that you want. And so you're helping someone else getting there. Every salesperson should be a helper, not a seller. What it ultimately comes down to. I'm sure their end game is to sell more, but you're only going to really sell and then build that lifelong customer, that engagement you talked about earlier, Swire, if you're delivering on the promises of the stories you share about what you make happen in their lives.
So, Park, I know that you work with a lot of sales professional, and I'm asking this on behalf of a lot of salespeople out there. I'm sure that they wonder that question. So, are you saying that we should go and start telling story and don't worry about sell? Like, what's the ROI and how asking this question for myself? How soon should I expect my story to convert it to dollar?
Well, it's like everything else. You can't put an actual number on how soon it's going to take, but I can share with you several instances. One, for instance, was with a company called Trimble out of Denver. They are a global SaaS provider to the heavy construction industry. They've been around since the early 1970s, so they've been doing this an awful long time. And I worked with them, both their sales and marketing team in this case, about this time last year. It was actually March of last year, and I taught them all about the ABT and then the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. This is a story you can tell in under a minute. And then I also taught them the 10-step story cycle system that they could use for their sales presentations and long form communications. Well, we did an interesting thing. After the training, they brought me in to be an ongoing story coach for them. And they had their marketers in 5 different countries that were doing these LinkedIn campaigns. They have very aggressive LinkedIn campaigns, and that they invest a lot of money into it, which makes sense because they're a B2B, of course.
Mhm.
Well, in March of last year, they ran it. They gave me their engagement numbers, and their engagement numbers were pretty good. They were like 4%, 6% engagement. And if you believe LinkedIn, they say anything above 2% is pretty good,
Yeah.
but they wanted more out of it. So in April, they had all their people write the same content for their LinkedIn messages, send them to me. And I didn't rewrite their content. All I did is reordered it because
Mm.
most of their content was non-narrative. And. We put it in the form of an and, but therefore, in many cases, it actually became much shorter. And after April, they shared their engagement rates. They went up by over 400%. In
Wow.
France alone, they went from like 6%, which again was pretty darn good, to over 17% engagement. And the only thing they did differently, Swire, was reorder the content in narrative form of the and, but, therefore. So there's one good example of an ROI. Others I can share with you is a major, major company out of Chicago that handles this global talent pool out there where you can go in and you can, hire talent and pretty much any sort of business, not full time, but these freelancers. And we taught their sales and marketing team, really their sales team, how to use the ABT. The very next week, they go in, one of their national sales guys goes in and lands a $250,000 contract with Adobe software systems.
Wow.
And then he sent us a note and he goes, the only thing I did differently was reordered my presentation using the story cycle system and started it with the and, but, therefore. And I found when I used the ABT, it got me completely focused on what the core problem solution narrative was, how I can help them over this problem. And he landed that $250,000 piece of business that day. So there's another example. And he will say, the only thing I did differently is reordered how I presented using the and, but, therefore. So that's just a couple examples of it where you can use the ABT in your prospecting emails, in all of your social channels, and of course, landing pages, internal communications, Slack communications, you name it. And the reason why it works is our limbic cause and effect, pattern seeking, decision making, buying brain that rests in our subconscious, that triggers our emotional center, loves the ABT because it hand delivers this message in the way it wants to receive content.
Yeah, Park, I want to share this story too. It's actually about you. And, to give listener backstory, Park asked me to listen to one of the podcasts. I think it's 395. You talk about, you know, timeshare salespeople, I think, are one of the best people who can use storytelling. They actually, send you to luxurious location where you actually sell yourself to buy that timeshare. And Park, as good as in curious to learn process, he actually signed up himself to go through one of those seminars just to learn, better in storytelling. Park, can you tell the listener a little bit more about what you've learned, and can we really take something out of it, with their storytelling?
Well, yeah, that comes from kind of a crazy experiment I did. So read Robert Cialdini's book Influence, which is like, at the very top of the list for salespeople. And I don't know, it's been around what, 15 years now or something like that. And I don't know, it's 2008, 2009. I read it and I go, wow, this is really super powerful. My wife, Michelle, and I, not too long after reading it, were over in Hawaii. We were hanging out with my mom and dad that were over there. They would go over 3 weeks out of every year in April to get out of the rain from the Pacific Northwest. And so we said, well, let's go over for a week and just hang with them. It'll be fun. While we're there, we had an opportunity of going through a timeshare. We actually volunteered to go through because we got a bunch of free golf and free food out of it. But more importantly, we wouldn't have normally done that. I wanted to see if these influence techniques that Cialdini spoke about in Influence actually were put to use. And by golly, they were. I mean, from every step of that presentation took us through using all these different little influence levers to try to get us to buy in. Thankfully, we didn't buy in, but they were really, all they were doing is trying to create a story in our brain to picture how marvelous it was going to be to have this timeshare, not only in Hawaii, but all these other wonderful places you can live. They very rarely, of course, talk about what it actually costs you and the actual impact on your budget and so forth. What they're doing is lighting up that theater of the mind so you can experience it, feel it, be a part of that timeshare community. They build on that big time. And then, boom, they're hoping to sign you at the end. Of course, it's been a very proven approach to timeshare selling. Now, I don't know that timeshare selling is really helping people. I think they're just selling you a bill of goods at this point. I'm not a big believer in those. But it's just an example of how story can be used very effectively. It can be used for good and evil. Either way, Swire, it can be equally powerful. But what I really recommend to your people is use it for good and not evil, because you can really sway that Homo sapien storytelling ape sitting across from you simply through the power of story and using these frameworks.
Well, I think, if we go deeper, again, as a salesperson, I would ask them different questions now, because by doing, the show, I talk to a lot of different people, and then the level of my question skills had gotten better. So I actually would ask them different things. And I know that every prospect will come in with their own story or dreams or goals that they're trying to accomplish. If you as a company can fulfill their dream or help them tell or complete their story, then you have an order. But if they come in and you tell them what you want them to hear on your side of the story, sometimes the disconnect comes and then they go away. So I think by asking question, actually ask the other person, what's your story like? What kind of story? In this case, might be a missing part. Maybe you can try to fulfill it. I think then you can actually help other people complete their side of the story.
Yeah, and I wouldn't use the S word. I wouldn't use what's your story, because people get really confused by that. Not their fault. It's just like, well, it's so general, I don't really know what you're asking me. What I like to do is use the ABT as a listening tool.
Hmm.
And I will go in first and say, what's your problem? What's the thing that's keeping you up at night? You want to really identify what that problem is. And you want that prospect to dig deep. What's really going on? They're going to be sharing you a story. You're not asking for a story. You're asking for them to take you to a moment in time that this problem is just driving them freaking crazy. And you know how it is too, Swire. You've probably have had it happen where you've triggered them and they're going, oh my God, you can't believe it. And they go on and on and on for
Uh-huh.
several minutes, right? Just let them go.
Mm.
Then what you do is you filter this through an and, but, therefore. And when they finally take a breath, when they finally take a break, you say, all right, here's what I heard you say. You want this, and it's important to you because of this, but you don't have it right now because of this, this, this. Therefore, imagine if we could get you here. That's what you're looking for, right? Then do this. And what happens is typically one of three things, or maybe all three things. Number one, they'll say, wow, Swire, you said that better than I did, which leads to number two. By golly, you actually listened to me. So you're building that trust right there, right? And then sometimes number three pops up. Sometimes it doesn't pop up. But when it does, it's really important to listen for it. And that is, Swire, you said that so well, I realized I forgot to tell you one other thing. And it's always that one other thing that is the real problem, the real crux of the problem that they're trying to solve. Everything else is just kind of symptoms led up to that. But what you're doing is you're building understanding for them. You're appreciating why they want it, and you're demonstrating that to them. You're empathizing with them, why they don't currently have it. And those three things are so important of understanding, appreciation, and empathy that leads to trust. They go, wow, you listened to me. You understood where I'm coming from. As a matter of fact, Swire, you're like me. Tell me, what do I need to do next? So what you're doing is you're simply helping them to get to that final, call to action. Then you can lead into the sale, but that sale better really help them, not just take their money.
Yeah, the best is, I don't even have to make that call to action. They said, we're ready to start. Where do we pay? So then either you're doing something right, or they just really buy into your story.
Right. Absolutely right, because you've got them so leaning in. In fact, when you use this and use the and, but, therefore on them, you can literally see them lean into you. Their body
Mhm.
actually moves. They don't even know they're doing it. But what that is you're connecting with that limbic subconscious brain, that buying brain. And then once they emotionally are bought in, then you can roll out the data. You can roll out the features and functions, because all they're doing is justifying that emotional purchase with their logic-driven, reasoned brain. But what the biggest mistake we all make in business is we think, that we got to sell smart. We've got to sell with logic and reason. The numbers are going to sell themselves. Well, they don't, because, think about it this way. What's the first syllable of the word numbers?
And
Numb, right?
mm,
They mean nothing to us. They mean nothing to this brain unless we put them into the context of a story. So that's why I'm a big believer in the storytelling process. And we found these three proven frameworks, starting with the ABT, that absolutely revolutionizes not only how you communicate, but how you connect and engage with your audiences.
Park, it's been a master episode for me. I'll definitely go and re-listen to it a number of times. For a listener who wanted to learn more about the ABT methods, that you mentioned the course, where can they find out more about that, and how should they connect with you?
Yeah, come on over to the Business of Story. That's the website, businessofstory.com, and go to /ABT. That'll give them more information on the ABT, and it's a place too where they can register for the course, the ABTs of Agile Communications. Again, it's only 1 hour long, 3 20-minute modules. I promise you it will completely revolutionize how you communicate. But that's the best place to find me. And then, of course, I've got a podcast that airs every Monday. I've been doing it for almost 8 years now. FeedSpot named it the #1 business storytelling podcast for 2022. I hope they'll name it again in 2023. But there, I've got over 400 episodes, or just coming up on 400 episodes. And I just interview people from around the world that use storytelling in surprisingly fun, interesting, and powerful ways. So check them out there. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Park, P-A-R-K, Howell, H-O-W-E-L-L. Come on over and join me there, and reach out if you have any questions for me.
Congratulations on your success, Park, and really, truly appreciate that you come onto the show today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Swire, and happy Valentine's Day.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.